Is there a mental health crisis in agriculture in Colorado?
Oh, I believe there is. People are very private. They don't like to talk about these sort of things.
Ranching is the love of my life, yeah. Second to my wife, I gotta say. When you're in this environment and you're up at sun up and you get to see all the glory. I like the honesty, the truism of it. I like that cowboy lifestyle.
I am the chief gate opener and bottle washer for my husband. We're together all the time. Yeah, I love it. Yeah, there's not a lot of women that do what I do. Yeah, that's right. But all the farm women and ranch women that I know, they do it.
I'd rather be out on a 90, 100-degree day working with the cattle than sitting in an air-conditioned house on my desk. It's a lifestyle as much as it is a source of income.
I've wanted to be a farmer since I could walk. It's who I wanted to be, it's who I was, it's everything I'd ever thought about through high school and in college was being a farmer.
I think what's unique about agriculture in Colorado is how vastly different it is, depending on where you want to look at. What it looks like to farm in the Eastern Plains versus the Western Slope is vastly different. And so, how do you achieve your goals with all these factors that are often beyond your control?
I think farmers and ranchers are exceptionally hardworking people. There's not a whole lot of industries and things you can do that require the same amount of input to hopefully get any output.
I mean, there's competition between ranchers. We help our ranchers out, but I'm gonna have the best bull and I'm gonna raise the best calf, and if my calf outweighs yours by 30 pounds, yeah, that was because of good management.
You'll see people out on a tractor in their fields till late hours of the night, but also stepping in to volunteer, go back and work some more.
Our crop never knows what day it is. It doesn't know it's Mother's Day, and it certainly doesn't know when a Saturday or Sunday fall within the growing season. We farm in windows, and those windows open and close quickly, and sometimes that comes at the sacrifice of family.
You're married to whatever you do. Because you have to be there 24/7.
Truly, our animals are not our pets, but we just love them like they're our children. So a lot of times in the morning, they get fed before we do.
Agriculture in Colorado is a $47 billion industry. I hear that figure thrown around a lot. What they don't take into account is 80% of those ranches, or maybe more, are small family-owned businesses.
If you travel around Colorado, you'll find century farms, which have been in the same family for 100 years. There's a lot of pride to be able to hand that off, and with it, the hope that every year it's getting better and you're continuing to build up that business and that legacy.
This vision that your grandparents, your great-grandparents had, homesteading, literally making it through all of the seasons, every year, all the droughts, all the flooding, and then passing it on to the next generation and having them take over and building it. The next generation has not only the responsibility, but the honor of maintaining what ranch or farm they had and growing it.
It's all about legacy. It's that ability to pass the family farm down. It's having your son grow up in your footsteps. It's me growing up in my dad's footsteps and my grandfather before him. It's a heavy burden sometimes to carry, but it's also a privilege.
I'm Jacob Walter. I grew up down here in southeastern Colorado on my family's cattle ranch, and it was always all hands on deck. You'd go to school all day, and then you'd go home, and you'd either be doing chores or you'd be working cattle. As soon as we could hang on to a saddle horn, we'd be sitting in the saddle and going, and it was a really good childhood. My grandpa started the ranch, and so I got to spend a lot of time with my grandma and grandpa, and I'd get off the bus, I'd run and get to see my grandma.
I'm a cattle rancher here in Los Animas County. I'm also the commissioner here, going on my second term. My wife and I have run cattle for probably 40 years, and 38 years. We've been married 39, so we've been running our own cattle for that long. It was just me and my kids and my wife, my right-hand man.
Our farm and ranch operation is located south of Eads, Colorado. We're about 60 miles from Kansas. Our son Jace has come back to farm with us, and he has taken on his grandpa's farm name, so he's known as Nagley Farms now.
My name is Mark Arnish, and I'm the owner here of Mark Arnish Farms, third-generation family farmer here in Prospect Valley, and we're a family of German immigrants. My family originally immigrated to this country in 1952 from Austria and settled in this area, and we've been here ever since. Well, my dad had a lot of adversity in his farming career. He basically farmed through the 1980s, the farm crisis years, and he stayed lean. He didn't spend a lot of money. He worked real hard, was incredibly frugal, and he survived. And because he was able to be successful in the 1980s, that allowed me to start my farming operation in the mid-1990s.
My dad was a larger-than-life kind of guy. He was always, hardworking, but he was also a very caring individual. Be serving on the local FFA advisory board, involved with some different philanthropic groups in town whenever he could. Always willing to help a stranger, always doing those small acts of kindness and just looking out for those around him. 2.5 years after my grandpa had passed away, my dad had always been, helping run the ranch, but that's when he really fully took over. One of the things that really sticks in my mind was when I would see my dad sitting at that kitchen table till 1, 2 o'clock in the morning, crunching numbers, figuring out how you're gonna make it work, how you're gonna keep a family going, how you're gonna carry on that legacy of agriculture.
2012 was when things, as they say, things kind of fell apart. For me, the situation was the long-term drought. Just year after year, we'd always managed to pay off our operating note, but it was getting to be more and more of a struggle, and it was taking more and more time to get it paid off, and we were having to put more on that note. I think the straw that broke the camel's back was, interestingly enough, the empty nest syndrome when our son went to college and he was the last one to leave the home. And I think that's just the final straw. And then wondering, is he going to come back? How are we going to keep this going if he doesn't come back?
Ranchers and farmers, they've got a commitment to that land and to that crop, whatever it is they're producing, whether it's corn or hay or cattle or sheep or hogs. They put their animals and their land first, and they leave it in better shape than the way they found them.
That connection to the land, often called the agrarian imperative, that's a huge drive for so many people. The theory behind it is it's sort of wired into people's DNA, that there's that purpose to it, and there's a sense of meaning, like you understand why you're doing that work and how important it is. There's so much of a drive to be able to maintain the land at all costs, to be able to share that with your family, to know that you're building something that you're going to pass on to the next generation. Like that part of the legacy, I think, is really important. The flip side of that is that's also what pushes people to take tremendous risks in terms of financial well-being, physical well-being, the long hours that you have to work, and that's very much fueled by that connection to the land. There's very few occupations that your success is so determined by factors beyond your control.
I have a plan A, B, C sometimes, and you get to the point where after so many years, it's like, why do I bother? That's my husband's point of view. It's like, yeah, we can do all the planning we want, and then, boy, in a moment's period of time, everything's changed.
The stresses that come with ranching are many. The price of feed, drought, blizzards, the cattle market. You can lose $25,000 in a day.
You're gambling on the weather, you're gambling on the dollar.
A lot of times we're up against a storm or a deadline, and if that means running around the clock, we do it.
You can have a really nice spring, your crop can be growing, and you can be a week from being ready to go out into the field and harvest that crop, and you can have a hailstorm come in and completely decimate your crop.
Storm cloud comes up over the horizon, and within a few hours, it's gone.
You got no mortgage payment now, and you're gonna have to go to your banker. You're gonna have to have another operating note.
How do you pay your light bill? How do you pay your health insurance? How do you keep those people that you promised to pay them back still supporting you?
I can't let this fail. I can't drop the ball.
Sometimes the margins are really thin, and that's why we have other jobs.
I was a nighttime janitor at a local high school. I worked through the night and then work all day long with the cattle.
You have a drought so bad you can't find pasture, you can't afford hay.
Water's a huge issue. I know within 2 days I could have 40 head of dead cattle out there.
If you don't have grass for the cows to eat on their own, then you have to feed them or sell them.
Decades and the legacy of several generations lost like that.
My kids aren't involved in it because they see how much time it takes. They knew they could make a better living somewhere else. Yeah, there's a lot of stress. But it's also beautiful, so.
It's not just, income, it's an identity, honestly.
What makes it really tough is if you're in a family ranch, the other brothers and sisters would say to them, why can't you make it work? Dad made it through the dirty 30s. Then you're a failure. And maybe they don't look at it that way, but that's the way you feel. Then you have to sell Grandpa's ranch that's been in the family for 4 generations. You're a huge failure. What are you going to do? Pump gas at Walmart? Flip burgers? And I've had 2 friends commit suicide because they couldn't handle letting their family down. It wasn't really the stress of being a rancher. It was knowing that they were letting their family down because they couldn't keep it together.
My dad was a kind of a tough guy, and we knew a little bit that he'd been struggling with depression, but not to the extent of where he actually was. He kept a lot of that to himself, and eventually, in August of 2016, it just boiled over, and that was the breaking point for him. I remember the day before and the day that my dad committed suicide very well. I think those will always be very ingrained in my mind. The day before, I was getting ready to go back to college, and my dad and my mom helped me pack up my car, get all my stuff loaded to start a new semester. And I remember that before I left, the last things that my dad said to me were, always remember that things are never bad enough that you can't get help. You can always get help. Told him I loved him, he told me he loved me, and I got in my pickup and I started driving for college, and that was the last time that I talked to him. I woke up the next morning and I had a bunch of missed calls on my phone, and I talked to my sister, and she told me, she said, Dad's dead, he's gone. And I just remember saying no. Just, I couldn't believe it. It was unimaginable to me that he could be gone, and that actually happened. And it was like my world stopped.
for the most part, we have learned to be jack of all trades. We've learned to just take care of things without a lot of assistance. If you're the only one that can do it, you just got to figure out a way to get it done. And you just don't really want to be vulnerable because you've not learned to be vulnerable. You haven't learned to really ask for help.
It's tough for most ranchers to even ask for help. If they're hurting, they're not going to tell you. You don't ask them, you got a problem? I don't care how close you are. You know, if you do, you might get hit in the mouth. I mean, it's not your business.
I've seen the agriculture people that I know as being very prideful people and very private people. So number one, they have a hard time admitting that they have an issue. And number two, they don't want to talk to anybody about it because, well, they don't think they understand them.
It is amazing to see the pride that people have in what they have been able to maintain and grow, but also massive amounts of anxiety around the pressure of, I need to do this. In order to honor my grandparents, my great-grandparents, I need to be the one to continue this. You can't just, I'm done with this, I'm tired, I'm gonna go get a job in corporate America. You can't do that.
You have grandparents, aunts and uncles, great aunts and uncles telling stories about what happened on the farm, who did what, and you just don't want the story to end with you.
Your word's your bond. If you tell somebody you're going to do it, you better do it. And if you can't get it done, you better have a damn good excuse why you didn't get it done. I always felt like I can pull myself up by my own bootstraps.
I think that strength that people in agriculture really have of, you know, I can fix it, I can do this. Sometimes, needlessly, that mentality is translated over to mental health, that I should be able to fix this.
I think sometimes we're afraid of disappointing them. And so I think there's that reluctance there. And you don't want them to pick up your burden because it's a burden and you're struggling, and last thing you want to do is put them in the same situation too, because you don't want to drag them down.
This is a community where they are some of the strongest people ever, physically, emotionally, mentally. They have so many things that they work through and that they deal with because they can't take a day off. My emotions don't matter as much because I need to make sure that X, Y, and Z gets done. I'll deal with this tomorrow. Just move on. You'll be fine. Buck up. But it doesn't make the problems go away. It doesn't make the internal emotions and the thought patterns go away.
If we look at a map of Colorado broken down into counties, there are 2 counties in Colorado that meet the criteria for partial coverage in terms of mental health providers available for that population, which means that with the exception of those 2 counties, the entire state is looked at as in a shortage of mental health providers to meet the needs of their communities. That's significant.
You're out there combining, you're out there working on fence, and you don't have the time to break free and take a 2-hour round trip to get to a city that has a counselor.
You name it, they're going to have difficulties because of the location, the proximity, the cost can be prohibitive, fear of the judgment from other people, even if it is a therapist.
For good or for ill, everybody knows your business. So on the other side, there's the gossip mill that goes around, and sometimes you'd just as much like not to be the center of attention.
It's not like you're going to go for mental health to go see a shrink, and they see your green Dodge pickup with the caved-in front quarter panel that everybody knows, and your dog sitting in the back.
For whatever reason, we still look at it as some kind of character defect or a moral flaw or a sign of weakness. And the whole work ethic around pull yourself up by your bootstraps, cowboy up, all those things that are valuable and are a huge piece of people being successful in agriculture have to have a balance to them as well. And it's as important that we take care of what's going on between our 2 ears as it is any other high-dollar piece of equipment in our operation.
He's over here in the living room. My relationship with my mom, she's one of the strongest people I know.
How could you burn the French toast?
think one of the things I've always been grateful for is how much her and my dad have always been like strong enough to say how much they love us. Some days are hard, but the bigger thing it triggers, especially for my mom, and what really tears her up, is when she sees other families going through this. Every day and every time we talk about it, she said, when you get out there, Jacob, you just need to tell people how much this affects their family and how much like the people left behind are gonna hurt, and how they have to do it for them.
For someone who always was planning and wanting to have something in place, I was not thinking about the future. I was just totally focused in the now. We're both getting older. We both have our physical issues that make it difficult to do the work we used to do. There's also a feeling of despair, not being able to get good production to pay off your bills. All this time, all these things that we've done, and we're just treading water, we're not really getting ahead. I don't see how we're gonna get past this. I was starting to have issues with sleep deprivation. I'd wake up multiple times, and by 3 o'clock in the morning, there was no going back to sleep. Then the wheels really fell off. I really went into a deep cycle of depression and anxiety. I didn't even leave the house. I stayed, I didn't want to go grocery shopping. I didn't want to go to church. One of my biggest issues was getting in a vehicle and driving. That really threw me into a cold sweat. It was pretty bad.
If someone's living in this situation where you're sort of always at the mercy of things beyond your control, that fight or flight system was never meant to help us deal with repetitive, chronic stress. And so what that does over time is it changes the chemistry of our brains. It makes it harder for us to use those parts of our brain that are about problem solving, creativity, engaging well with others, because you do basically end up in this sort of fight or flight where it's all about survival.
It takes longer to make decisions that would normally happen in less time. And when you have a family farm and you got family members working on the farm, well, then that dynamic gets all screwed up.
You can have so much growth and so much prosperity, followed by a year of devastation, followed by a year of success. That's an emotional roller coaster. Their sleep is often impacted, either sleeping way too much or complete inability to sleep. Substance use can often be jacked completely up.
Then another one may be the social isolation too. I spend all my time having to work these long hours on trying to keep this operation afloat, so I don't have time to connect with others. I don't have time to go to church. I don't have time to go to coffee.
Where we raised our kids was 45 miles from anywhere. And so, if you wanted to go to the grocery store, you were at least an hour away. Or to anything. Because a lot of those people are out a lot further from town than I am.
I'm a burden, I'm causing more problem, it'll never get better. I can't see a future. I can only see pain, I can only see sorrow, I can only see disappointment. I have talked to a couple people in ag that say, well, when my horse is lame, I just take it out to the back 40. So why can't I do that same thing to myself? Am I contributing enough? Am I doing enough? Am I enough? That's where it ends up going. And when the question is, I'm not enough, that's where we start to get into really concerning thought patterns and behaviors.
When you get into a position to where, like my friend was that over in New Mexico, he was struggling. He was struggling with inflation and drought, and I talked to him one evening in a thunderstorm. Lightning hit the house, and there was actually sparks flying around the house. And I said, hey, buddy, I got to go. I'm going to get hit right in the ear. If I don't jump off, I'll call you in the first thing in the morning. And he had told me about the trip that they were going to be taking the next day, a fishing trip. He was taking the girls fishing. And so I called early. Or no, his daughter called me at 5 o'clock and said that he had committed suicide in his boss's front yard. I'd do anything for that man. he just told me about his day and how it was going, but I could tell something was off. There was just something that was kind of off about the conversation, and he never complained. And most ranchers are that way. If they can't get through it on their own, then...
When you know someone's normal, when you know what to expect, they're kind of predictable. But when they start saying things that seem a little bit off, when you, as someone who is watching someone that you love and their personality is changing, their habits are changing, first thing I always think is go to that person directly and ask them, hey, I've noticed that this is how things used to be and now this is becoming more of a pattern. Help me understand what's going on. In my 25 years of doing suicide assessments, I have never had someone be offended when I ask them, what suicidal thoughts are you having? Never, not once. I've had people say, I'm not having any suicidal thoughts. Good to know. I've had a lot of people that I didn't think was actually having suicidal thoughts admit to me, well, yeah, I think about this and this and this.
I can't stress the number of times that I've done suicide assessments with people and asking them, have you ever had a plan to complete suicide and something or someone stopped you? The number of times that some small caring gesture by someone else was the things that pumped the brakes and gave them another day is one of the most optimistic and positive things I've ever held on to. Because it can be that simple. Some small, caring act of concern and consideration to others may be exactly what's needed, and that costs us nothing to do. We can't turn someone's thinking dark. We can't create depression. We can't create suicidal thinking. Ask questions and know that you can't make things worse.
When that all happened, he had cattle scattered all over northern New Mexico, from Folsom to Kenton, Oklahoma to Clayton, New Mexico. And his daughter was at a loss what they would do with those cattle. And I said, we're going to continue to run them. And I'll come down there and ride them once in a while. And then when she left home and went to college, we sold the cows and paid her tuition. And that was my way of helping my best friend out. And I was at the head of his casket when we buried him. Yeah, I was his huckleberry.
I just, was grasping at straws. And so it was concerning because I was well aware of it. I had read all kinds of stuff. I had seen the warning signs, but I was ignoring them. My brother said, look, you need some help. I've been there. I really think you need to go to the counselor that I had when I was struggling. He's really good. And, but you're going to have to get up here to do it. And he says, I'll come down and I'll get you. But I got myself up there and I stayed there for 6 weeks and I started counseling.
Over the next few years, I kind of felt a disconnect. It was just emotionally overwhelming in a lot of ways. But I started to have trust issues with people. I didn't feel like I was in crisis, but I knew that I wanted more out of life. I didn't want to carry that. I wanted to get a better grip of what mental health looked like. So I found counseling resources through my involvement with Colorado Farm Bureau and their creation of the CAMP program.
There are some immediate resources available for people. The other thing that we're really fortunate to have in Colorado is the Colorado Agricultural Addiction and Mental Health Program, which offers free voucher mental health services, 6 free sessions for those involved in agriculture and their family members. We can handpick someone within a week to get started with someone. And that's easy to set up. It costs nothing out of pocket. It's done through telehealth, and they will work around a schedule that makes it viable and meets the producer where they're at in terms of their needs to get connected.
So one of the best things about telehealth is that you can literally access therapy from your house. I meet with a lot of people in their car. They take 1 hour break from their work so that they can meet with a therapist and then go right back to work. So it helps from a time point of view, but definitely with confidentiality.
Counseling was really great. He was wonderful. What I really liked about it and what really helped me was relying on my faith. That was very important. I know there's lots of people that have managed to get through that don't have that relationship with the Lord. That for me is very critical even today. There was just some things, baggage I'll call it, from my younger years. And he says, so you need to forgive yourself before you can move forward. You know, I needed to be part of the forgiveness. It was me forgiving myself or forgiving others who had created a situation that had caused me hurt, so.
The folks at Farm Bureau that help run all that on the backside understand people in agriculture. They understand what rural Colorado is like, and so they're able to find people that can really serve our demographic really well. I found Kirsten Wolfsper, and I still remember the first time I talked to her on the phone. She said, okay, she said, before we do any sessions, we're gonna have a kind of meet and greet, and we're just gonna make sure that we're the best fit for each other. So one of my favorite things, believe it or not, was she's like, I give homework.
I have not yet had a single client that wasn't willing to roll up their sleeves and get dirty with it. And they truly are the hardest working people I've ever worked with. I give them a homework assignment and they don't just do the homework, they really get into it.
There were 3 main things that I wanted to get out of the camp program in my time with Kirsten. One of those was I wanted to be able to talk about my dad and that experience and without it being so painful. The second thing I wanted to kind of work through some of those trust issues to be able to trust others. And then the third thing was I wanted some tangible skills. So if anything felt overwhelming, that I could take a step back, realize what I was feeling, what those emotions were and what I was experiencing, to live a happier and more fulfilled life.
So many people, I don't have time, but we're not talking like take 5 days off. Really, you can do a lot of self-care in 10 minutes every day. I had a client that really felt like he was in a rut the whole time. I'm just in a rut. I can't get out. I'm stuck at the bottom of this rut. So I told him, literally, go out to your field, find a ditch, and sit in it. Just sit in it for a little while. Look around. What do you see? Observe everything that's around you. See the way that other animals come in and out. See the way that the weather impacts it. Just sit there. Feel it. And he was, rolling his eyes, and this is kind of ridiculous. All right, fine, whatever, lady. And the next session, he came back and he was like, that was so profound. I said, well, tell me, what was so profound about it? Let's talk about that. And he said, just being able to sit in that rut, knowing I could get out of it. Number 1. Didn't feel like it, because when he's sitting in it, the banks are higher than him. But he knew he could get out of it, and watching to see what would be the best path. Sometimes it's right next to you. Sometimes it's down the road a little bit. Sometimes you have to walk somewhere in order to get there. And that was what he found. And that changed everything in our therapy. That simple metaphor. All of a sudden he recognized that what he was trying to do was scramble out of it right now immediately. And what he needed to do was just to sit with it for a little bit, knowing that this time would pass and that he would then be able to safely climb out of his rut. Someone in agriculture, they want a tool. They want to know what they're doing. I mean, they work with tools all the time.
If you have the right tools on hand, you're going to do a better job of repairing. And so what we want to do is be able to offer tools to help people better take care of their stress, better manage their relationships, better take care of those things they need to promote their wellness. And there's a wide range of things. As a small example of a very practical tool that anyone can do, something as simple as learning how to breathe. My initial response as a therapist was like, that's just silly. The next person tells me I need to breathe, I'm going to throw a chair through the wall or something. But the more you understand the physiological basis for this, if I control my breathing, I control my heart rate. That pumps the brakes on that fight or flight response. So it seems elementary, but on a physiological level, it's one of those things that can actually pay off some big dividends.
Another tool that I use quite often with people, specifically around anxiety and stress and feeling overwhelmed, is bubbles. So I have people write down all the things in their world that are causing them angst, stress. And then they need to organize them into bubbles. So the smallest bubble is what they have absolute full control over. I can control my hygiene. I can control what I eat. Then I look at the middle bubble, which is what are things that you have some sway over, some control over. I can't control you in a conversation, but I can control me. And then you've got the outer bubble of all the things that you cannot control. You cannot control the weather. You cannot control politics. But then the next step with that is once you've identified these bubbles, then you start to find some of the things in the middle bubble that you might be able to control a little bit more. Or also recognizing I actually don't have any control over that. That needs to go to the outer bubble. And then it alters the amount of energy that you give to each one of these different things instead of being so frustrated that this and this and this is happening and you can't do anything about it.
Even if you feel like you're doing fine, can you look in the mirror and say that you're doing your level best by those relationships that are important to you? Do you have enough left in your tank at the end of the day to do right by your kids, to do right by your spouse, to do right by yourself? If you feel like you're constantly walking on eggshells, you're on red alert all the time, you're just waiting for the next shoe to drop, I would challenge whether or not you're really feeling fine. And if not, it's worth getting some help for that.
I mean, I'm old school. You handle your own problems, and most ranchers are that way. But when it comes to mental health, get some help. And sometimes it's just a matter of listening to get it off your chest. And in the process, you might figure out a way to get out of whatever predicament that you're in.
People often think that the reason you'd get help for mental health is that you're in crisis or you're contemplating suicide. And that's not the case at all. For me, I wasn't in crisis. I just wanted a better quality of life because I wanted to be a better uncle, and I wanted to be a better brother, and I wanted to be a better friend.
Well, I just started feeling more like me. I started having the ability to feel joy again and to feel not dreading the day coming and not feel like I was slogging through a morass of sludge. I just felt kind of some freedom.
Oh, it was great. Yeah, I still talk to Kirsten, and I got the 3 things that I really wanted out of my experience. I can talk about my dad a lot easier without becoming completely overwhelmed, and still working on those trust issues, but definitely on the way.
I mean, I still struggle. I still have issues. I still have those times, but I'm in a much better place than I would have been otherwise. As my counselor said, you're going to run into stressful times. You're going to, start having these feelings of pressure, of being overwhelmed. He said, but you had them before you dealt with your crisis, and you got through them. He says, you'll have them again, and you'll get through them.
So there's no way that I can foresee that we will ever be able to develop enough capacity to where every county in Colorado is going to have a surplus or even an adequate amount of service providers to meet that need. And so it seems to me that the next best thing we can do is really work to strengthen our communities and help people understand their capacity to make a difference with their neighbors, with their family members, and to really ask people in a meaningful way, how are you doing?
Our soils are alive. We have to make these systematic investments in soil health, just like we need to make systematic investments in our mental health. We know that when we wear out soils, no one benefits from that. We finish the field, we finish the crop, we finish off the task, and that always allows us time to carve out for family fun. You can't have a farming community and you can't have a family farm like ours without incorporating a little fun.
The goal for that farm is to raise something that you can harvest. And you've got to put some work into it to make it happen. And so when we're working at mental health, we need to keep that seed of mental health growing and maturing. The benefits can be not just to yourself personally, but also perhaps to help others and to spread the wealth around.
I don't think we thank them enough as a whole for what they do to contribute to our society. And we need to take care of our people within agriculture because they literally are taking care of us.
You know, your ability to get that semi-load full of cattle to the next step in that process so that it becomes food for an entire city, that means something.
We've just got too much on the line. I just have too many family members that depend upon me, too many friends, too many businesses. You know, these small rural communities like the one that I live in depends on the American farmer being successful. And when he's not, there's a lot of hurt to go around.
Your family deserves to keep you around, and so do all your neighbors. You know, the good Lord put you in this position for a reason, I believe. Nobody does our job better than we do.
There's fences to be built, there's firewood to be cut, and you got a horse out here that thought he was going to get you off, but you got him rode, and take a lot of pride in that because it wouldn't have happened if you hadn't been there making it happen.
It's irreplaceable. I know no other sensation I've ever been a part of that's exhilarating and crushing all at the same time like production agriculture.
Even for all the difficulties and the heartache, it's still just something, it's in your blood.
Enjoy the great crops. Enjoy the great crops because there aren't very many of those. And that's the momentum that should carry us through. That's the promise of agriculture. That's why it's not a job. It's the most exhilarating thing I've ever been a part of, and I want to do it again over and over for the rest of my life, if I can.
We love the lifestyle. We love the animals. We love being outdoors. We just love it. It's in our heart. It's in our soul. It's who we are.
Once you've done it, once you've saved a baby calf like that, and you provide for your family, and you're doing what you love, yeah, it's some amazing stuff right there.
We talk a lot about legacy in ag communities, but when I think of legacy, I also think of the legacy, those last words that my dad, spoke to me, that you can always get help. And I think passing on that legacy of strength, of being able to get help, when you're hurting. It's parents teaching their children and their grandchildren that it's all right to reach out for help, and that there's really great strength in the rural ag community of a neighbor being able to go to a friend and just ask, how are you doing? You doing all right?